The sun shimmered through the windows of the ward, playing with bright rays and touching everything around with its warmth. Inside, everything was bleak. Gray whitewashed walls, peeling blue paint with deep cracks, stale laundered linens, a depressing silence that pressed, and the monotonous drips of endless drips. Wendy stared blankly at the black dot on the ceiling. Her arm wasn't even whimpering anymore. It was numb, her body aching from lying in one position for so long. The woman was seriously ill and almost did not get up. There was no strength. And the moral state was terrible. Complete detachment from the world, from people, and the feeling of loneliness and longing that filled everything inside. There was a nasty lump in my throat all the time, but there were no tears. I didn't want to live at all, and why should I? After all, the doctors made it clear that the situation is serious. It would be better to suffer and die. Wendy had long ago lost track of time, hours, days. Days of the week merged into one and dragged on for an incredibly long time. All she could do in her dire straits was to remember and relive her past. But these memories made her even sadder, because her whole life was left there, in her past life, and only emptiness ahead. Wendy grew up in the countryside. Her mother worked on the farm, her father was a tractor driver. They lived hard, barely survived from bread to water. All because they didn't want to work for Carl, the farmer. He took over the whole village. He treated his workers terribly, paid them pennies, made them work 14 hours a day. He could even not pay at all, if a person did not like him, or dared to defy him. So my parents couldn't stand such a brutal attitude and quit their jobs. They had to survive on their own, because there was simply no other work in the village. They started their own farm, worked like hell. But Carl was so angry with his parents that he was always putting sticks in their wheels. He specially persuaded visiting buyers not to take meat, milk, and eggs from their family, even conceded the price of his goods, just so that the resellers would not go to the hated family. For this reason, they had almost no revenue. The only help was trading on the highway, but there was only boredom. Wendy did well in school, and everyone cheated on her math tests. She felt sorry for her parents, saw how hard it was for them, how sick her mother was, the huge veins on her legs, her calloused, unladylike hands. They got up in the dark, and all plowed, working a huge vegetable garden and farm. But despite such a hard life, her mother loved her only daughter very much. Sometimes she pigeonholed her, pressed her to herself, and called her a pebble. Since the 5th grade, Wendy was courted by her fiancé, Dave. At first, of course, it was a childish mixture of friendship and sympathy. The boy carried her backpack, pulled her ponytails, and walked her home. They went swimming together to the river, burned fires in the evenings, and baked potatoes and fried bread. But by graduation, they'd already had a real torrid affair. Dave now carried her a bunch of wildflowers, sang heartwarming songs about love and fidelity to the guitar, and took her for rides on his moped. Wendy's parents were happy, because Dave was from a well-to-do family, so their daughter wouldn't have to live as hard as they did after the wedding. But Dave's parents were obviously not happy about their son's choice. Why would they want a daughter-in-law with no money and no dowry? It's a hassle. They kept setting their son up with Claire, that farmer's daughter. And the girls were very different in appearance. Wendy looked like a teenager, stubby, black-haired, short. Claire was already in her prime, full breasts and appetizing forms, tall, fashionably dressed, and self-confident girl. It should be noted that Dave, of course, looked at Claire like a cat at sour cream, but he had known Wendy for 100 years, loved her, and could not betray and abandon her. And then the groom was drafted. There was a big send-off, and the whole village went out. Dave kissed his Wendy frantically, and they sat side by side like lovebirds. The groom whispered to the bride, "Why don't we run away? To our place in the hut. I'm fed up with everyone. When will we see each other again?" And they slowly slipped away. All the same, all the guests were already in a drunken rage, cheered and cried, sang songs, and danced to the harmonica. The couple had a cherished place, a small hut made of branches in the forest on a clearing. They liked to seclude themselves there, dream about the future, and kiss to death. But tonight was different. Dave had built a fire, and they'd grabbed a bottle of wine and some snacks from the table. The boy kissed his beloved and whispered to her, "Darling, darling, don't send me away today. What should we wait for? We love each other and we'll get married when I get out of the army. Come to me. Don't be afraid." and Wendy swam and gave herself to her lover. They came home at dawn, happy and elated. Dave was taken away to the army, and Wendy waited faithfully, missed him, often wrote letters to her lover, called him. In the last 6 months he picked up the phone less and less often, answered reluctantly and briefly, and all referred to the busyness. The girl began to worry, felt by his tone, something is wrong. Everything became clear when the groom returned to his native village and told Wendy, without looking her in the eye, that he was leaving her and marrying Claire. This betrayal so undermined the girl that she went completely blind, just sobbing into her pillow day and night. The villagers sympathized with her in person, but whispered behind her eyes, "What a Dave. He used the girl and left her. Who needs her now, spoiled? He chose a bride with a good price. Wendy's fault. She shouldn't have jumped into bed so soon." Her father, too, was indignant and pestered his daughter with admonitions, but her mother understood and pitied her, and came up with this. "Wendy, baby, you can't beat yourself up like that. You're already like a skeleton, you don't eat anything, you don't leave the house. Don't beat yourself up. Dave's a bastard, what can you do? Why don't you go and study in the capital? Your father and I can't afford university, but at least you can finish college. You'll get a job, you'll get over the bastard, and things will get better." Wendy grasped the idea like a life preserver and decided to go. Out of sight, out of mind. The girl entered the College of Economics. She was given a room in the dormitory, and she began to study hard. 3 years flew by like one day, and here it is, the long-awaited diploma. After graduation, Wendy got a job in a small but very dubious firm for the manufacture of components for furniture. There was an eternal turnover of personnel, and it was alarming, although the salary promised quite solid. The girl decided to try, because you can always leave. The owner of the company was an elderly and not very pleasant person, Louise. She was soft at the interview, promised golden mountains, and accepted Wendy as an accountant. The girl began to deal with documents and reports, payroll, and was horrified. Most of the firm's profits were based on successful transactions and brazen machinations with the staff. The management formalized a new employee as a trainee, but not enrolled in the staff, explaining that it is only for a month, allegedly probationary period, and then there will be a salary and the staff will definitely take. But after the expiration of time, the employee was informed that he was not suitable and did not pay not a penny at all. Poor guy could not even complain he is not on the staff. He couldn't prove that he even worked here. The rates were miserable, even ridiculous respectively, and the tax Gulkin knows, and the rest in the form of bonuses, which was rare. And there were a lot of violations like that. People were simply cheated, hence the turnover. The second thing that struck Wendy was the egregious amount of rejects and losses. And why? The greedy owner bought the lowest quality material, the workers were changing frequently, and there were no specialists. The newcomers allowed the defects. Wendy worked for a month and decided enough was enough. She had to get out of here. She wrote a letter of resignation and personally took it to the owner. She was surprised and asked why. Wendy couldn't take it anymore and told her everything she'd dug up. And in the end she blurted out, "You can't work like this, or you'll be out of business. And I'm not going to sign any fake bonuses or participate in any other scams." Why? Because there are other ways. Teach and value specialists. Pay them without cheating, then people will stop running away. Invest in normal material, quality work, there will be no returns and lawsuits. I think for 6 months everything can be adjusted. You are already the third companion refuses. Louise was angry at first. "Who the hell are you? You've been here a week and you're bossing me around. I've been running this company for 5 years and I haven't failed yet. There's some truth to what you're saying, though. Things have been going badly lately. Well, let's try to improve the situation together, and if it works, you'll be the lead economist, okay?" Wendy agreed, even curious. "Suitable, but I don't need to be paid like everyone else. I know my salary." Louise nodded, but in her heart she disliked the upstart, even though she recognized that she was right. The owner overcame her greed and listened to Wendy's advice, and after a while the company's business not only leveled out, but its income increased significantly. Louise rubbed her hands together with joy and transferred Wendy, as promised, to a new high-paid position, because the benefits of her work were obvious. The girl saved hard for a year, spent almost nothing, and was able to open a small but her own business, a small cleaning company. There were 6 employees. Wendy personally selected all of them, because the image of the company depended on the quality of cleaning, tactfulness, and decency of the maid. And little by little things started to happen. Wendy was not stingy on the inventory and cleaning products. She took only the most expensive and effective. Soon there was no shortage of clients, including regular ones. All the income from her business Wendy again put into circulation and began to expand. Now her maids went to events and celebrations. They're paid much more. As funny as it may sound, 4 years later Wendy's income level surpassed Louise's in times. The latter was terribly angry in the shower, and all dreamed of laying siege to too active worker. Even marveled at how, with an ordinary college without higher education, she was able to do business so skillfully. A nugget, no other way. But no one even realized how hard it was for Wendy herself. Yes, she had bought an apartment, and she was very proud of it, even if it was a used car. From the outside, it looked like everything was fine. Everything would be fine, but there was no time left for personal life at all. The poor girl was falling off her feet, spinning like a squirrel in a wheel. It was very important for her to make a name for herself. She remembered all too well the poverty she'd grown up in. So Wendy wanted her future family, which was sure to be, to never need anything. Even to the funeral of her own father, who had died so suddenly of cardiac arrest, she was late. Couldn't leave her job. With John, Wendy had long been familiar. It is the son of the owner. He sometimes appeared in the firm, but more often liked to vacation abroad, only fictitiously listed as a consultant. Of course, the guy had heard rumors from employees about the talented and far from poor employee, who in parallel still manages to run her own business. And he took a closer look at her. Not a beauty, too thin, nose sharp, looks like some kind of bird. But all in all, she's all right. But with a wife like that, you won't go to waste. No need to dry your head, where to earn money. She'll do it all herself. And John went on boarding. He so beautifully courted, not stingy on gifts and flowers, whispered in her ear how he loved, how he wanted to create a family, that he dreamed of children. Wendy had long been tired of loneliness. Her heart asked for love and affection. She fell in love at once and for real. 3 months later, the couple had a wedding, of course, at Wendy's expense. The greedy mother-in-law did not spend a penny. The young couple also began to live separately, in his wife's apartment. For the first year they lived well. John was satisfied with everything. He realized, the main thing is to speak beautifully, be gentle and all. Wendy is ready to do anything. But mother-in-law all envied black envy and slowly turned her son against Wendy. When you already have children? Look at her. She has no face, no skin, a sheep's weight. She's so beautiful. What do you see in that stuck-up girl? John began to say to Wendy more and more often that she wouldn't give him a baby. The woman was very worried about it. She underwent a comprehensive examination, and the results were shocking. The chances of getting pregnant were 50-50, but Dr. A strongly recommended that the husband also be examined, because men can have problems too. At home after dinner, Wendy decided to have a serious conversation. John, listen. I was in the clinic. Yes, indeed, I have problems with conception. One tube is obstructed, but it does not mean that I am infertile. There's a chance. You need to go there and get tested too, to make sure everything is okay. The man jumped up and down in his chair. What more do you need? What the hell am I doing in there? I don't have any problems, okay? You're the one who's not healthy, so get treatment. And leave me alone. I'm not going anywhere. And let's get this unpleasant conversation over with. Wendy was very hurt that her husband didn't support her, and considered this problem only hers. She cried for a long time. The quarrels in the family became more and more frequent. The mother-in-law also added oil to the fire. But 6 months later, a miracle happened and Wendy got pregnant. She was so happy finally. It had been such a difficult journey, painful procedures, injections. But the main thing was the result. John was happy too, but he was in no hurry to take care of his beloved. Wendy still worked like a horse, ate on the run, slept sometimes for 4 hours. But her husband did not work too hard, worked a little, for the sake of a tick, and more often began to go with friends to saunas and baths. That day he was just returning home, having had a nice rest not only with friends, but also with beauties from the escort. He lost control of his car and had an accident. Lucky for him, he only suffered some fractures. But Wendy was so scared, so nervous, she had a miscarriage. She was devastated, and her dreams of being a mom again came crashing down. She fell into a deep depression. Nothing made her happy anymore. John didn't even apologize, didn't pity, didn't support her. They had become strangers. Eventually, Wendy's body, too, failed. One sickness after another, and she was hospitalized for a long time. Doctors all examined her. The diagnosis was disappointing. They suspected the worst. The woman was getting worse and worse. Constant bleeding, incomprehensible rash, weakness, loss of strength. At times she vomited. And there was a nasty lump in her throat, preventing her from swallowing and breathing. She had almost stopped getting up. So weak and desperate was she. She only dreamed of one thing, to die soon and not to suffer. But the mother-in-law was rubbing her hands and rejoicing. Very soon they will get rid of this upstart, and her company will go to John. You just need to have time to make a will. The husband did not grieve much, for he did not really love Wendy. She was convenient for him. John supported his mother's idea. He began to visit his wife more and more often and slowly worked her over. Hello, darling. How are you? Look what I brought you. An orthopedic pillow, cherry juice, sour, so you don't vomit, and your favorite buns. The woman was always so genuinely happy when her husband came, smiled, and at least for a while forgot about the pain. But this time he shocked her. Wendy, listen to what I tell you. I want you to understand it right, no offense. I believe and hope you'll get better. But just in case, I made a will on your behalf with a lawyer. Will you sign it? Just in case, if anything, I'll take over the firm instead of you. I'm doing it now, you see. And this way your life's work will go under the hammer. It's a pity. Wendy grinned bitterly. She could feel the falseness in his voice. But she was in a very bad way. Obviously not for long. So she signed it. She didn't care anymore. The satisfied husband immediately said goodbye, and on the way he pleased his mother. Mom, we did it. Wendy didn't even bother. She signed everything. Now that she's dead, I'm the owner of her company. You should have seen her. The immortal Koschov was prettier than that. Her days are definitely numbered. Good for you, son. You've got your own business now, and we'll find you a better bride, don't worry. That was the last visit of her husband. He never came back. Wendy's treatment didn't help at all. It only got worse, and she suddenly thought, what am I doing here? If I can't live this way or that way, I should at least see my mom before I die to say goodbye. I'm already guilty before her, so seldom visited her. All I could think about was business and family, and I neglected my mother. I'm going to die in my own home. I won't be any worse off than here. Nobody needs me here. The woman said nothing to anyone, pulled out the IV, hastily dressed, and quietly left. She barely hitchhiked to the village. The truck driver took pity on her and gave her a free ride. Her mother almost fainted when she saw her daughter on the doorstep in such a pitiful state. She was crying and wailing. Daughter, my dear, what is wrong with you? Are you sick? Only your eyes are left. You're wobbling like a twig in the wind. Take off your clothes. Go lie down on the couch. I'll get you a blanket. Wendy cried quietly, kissing her mother's hands and repenting. Mommy, I've been so bad to you. I rarely came to see you. I didn't visit much. I didn't even see Daddy off properly. I was pursuing my career and pleasing my husband. Mommy, I feel so bad. The baby died before it was born, and now I'm dying. My days are numbered. I decided to come and say goodbye and die in my native village. Nobody needs me in this town. No one loved me in this life as you did. No one pitied me. I'm sorry for everything, Mommy. I love you. Wendy turned her back to the wall and sobbed bitterly, huddled in a ball. Kenzie didn't try to torture her about anything, just stroked her shoulders and whispered, And I love you, my sunshine. Cry, it'll get easier. I'll make you a soothing tea with herbs. No, my little one. Do not say such terrible words. I do not want to believe in them. You're my light in the window. How could I be without you? 4 days passed. Wendy lay motionless, withdrawn, and no longer cried, but inside was like a scorched field, a hole. Her mother was very worried about her daughter, offered her something to eat, something to drink, tried to get her to talk, but there was no reaction. Then the old woman, wise in life, went for a trick. She herself from the morning did not get up and began to sigh and call her daughter. Wendy, my daughter. Oh, something shot me in the back. I can't get up, it hurts so much. And I have a mountain of things to do. Will you help me? I need to feed the household and go to the forest for berries. I'm selling blueberries and I'm making some for the winter. Don't say no to your mother. I'll rest for a day and tomorrow I'll be as good as new. Wendy immediately got out of bed, went to her mother, rubbed her back with bee venom ointment, gave her a pill and quietly asked, "Tell me what you need to do, Mom." Kenzie told her everything and rejoiced in her heart. "Yay, I did it. My daughter has found her strength. Nothing, she'll walk in the woods, nature, forest, maybe she'll feel better. I can't watch her die." Nadia did her chores, stroked her old dog Julka for a long time, and she caressed her and looked at her with such honest and devoted eyes. And then she put on her rubber boots, put on a thick windbreaker with a hood so that mosquitoes and noose wouldn't eat her alive, took a bow and went to the forest. She had known all the paths there since childhood, so she went without fear. She didn't care either. Wendy wandered on her way and did not look around, completely immersed in the black thoughts of death. The woman didn't notice how she had gone into the marshlands where none of the locals risked to go. Everyone knew you could drown in the mire. But instead of blueberries, Wendy saw a huge field of cranberries. The berries glistened like beads. The woman started picking. She wanted to please her mother. She moved away from the holly and stunted trees. The berries were large and choicest, and the bundle began to fill up very quickly. Wendy walked forward and suddenly she took a careless step and fell into the viscous slurry almost up to her waist. She tried to get out, grabbing at some driftwood, but it fell through too. And then she was terrified. No one knew where she was, and soon she would be sucked into the swamp and there would be no trace of her. Wendy had wanted to die so badly, but now she suddenly wanted to live. And the woman began to shout in an uncontrollable voice, "Help me! Somebody! People! Hello!" She was being sucked deeper and deeper. She couldn't believe that she was going to die so horribly and ridiculously. She was already hoarse, but there was no one but her own echo. The noose clung to her face and hands and stung mercilessly, adding to her misery. Suddenly she heard a rustle. Someone was running toward her, and then she saw a real huge wolf. It was very close and looked at her so closely and attentively, baring its fangs. Wendy squealed and squeezed her eyes shut. The thought flashed through her mind. That's it. Now they'll eat her. But the wolf did not attack. On the contrary, he howled and ran off into the thicket. And in a few minutes he came running again and brought the gamekeeper with him. He was a tall, stately, gray-haired man with a beard. Wendy began to beg again. "God, man, help me, I beg you, help!" The bearded man frowned and began to command, "Don't scream, save your strength, and do as I tell you or you'll really drown. How did you get here, traveler?" The man took a huge knife out of his backpack, climbed dashingly up a small pine tree and began to cut its top. He timed it just right, and it came crashing down almost on top of Wendy's head. The bearded man reached down to the ground, grabbed one end and began to shout, "Grab the branch, hold on tight, and try to pull your knees up a little at a time, but not sharply. Don't panic. It's the worst thing that can happen. I'm not going to leave you. It's going to work out." Without wasting a second, Wendy grasped the branches of the pine tree, and using her hooked fingers, she slowly pulled the senseless body to the surface. Her boots and warm socks remained forever in the mire, but it didn't matter. Already on dry land, the exhausted woman could only whisper, "Thank you," and lost consciousness, her already weakened body unable to cope. The bearded man lifted the traveler in his arms, soaked from head to toe in swamp sludge, and carried her to the hermitess. She lived as a recluse deep in the forest. She was feared by everyone, thought to be a witch, but still she was often consulted. She could cure many diseases with her hands and herbs. But the huntsman was friends with her. He wasn't afraid of her. He knew that Grandma Pam was not a witch but an honored surgeon in the past. She'd just had an irreparable tragedy in her life and lost her whole family. So Pam broke down, couldn't see anyone at all, ran away from people, settled in the woods. She thought it was just for a while until the depression passed. But she stayed there for good. She read a lot and began to understand herbs, mushrooms, made medicinal potions. She once helped a gamekeeper, and that's how they met. Their fates are remarkably similar. Jack, too, was an investigator in the past, gave many years to this profession, and he had a favorite wife, Taya. But God never gave them children. They wanted to take a child from the orphanage. They collected documents. But everything turned out quite differently. Taya suddenly fell ill. At first they thought it was a cold, high fever, runny nose, but only a very bad headache. Doctors did not notice a life-threatening disease, prescribed antivirals, and let her go home. But by night Taya was already burning with fire and was unconscious. A rash appeared, and by morning she was gone. The autopsy showed it was meningitis. This ridiculous death shocked Jack. He could not tolerate the sympathetic looks of his colleagues, and at home he wanted to howl with longing. Then Jack paid up, gave up everything, sold his apartment, and moved to the country. He got a job as a gamekeeper. In the forest he was somehow calmer at heart, and the soul wound slowly healed. Once he rescued a little wolf cub that had fallen into a trap. Then he took it to the hermitess. The surviving wolf cub was named Gray. He grew up and remained loyal to his savior. He lived in Jack's yard and always went with him on his rounds. Jack barely made it to Pam's hut and started pounding on the door. The frightened woman immediately ran out. The man nodded at the woman in his arms and said, "Here, I found her in the woods, in the middle of nowhere, almost drowned in the swamp. She needs help. She can't come to her senses. Can you help her? Take her to the bathhouse. I've just heated it. And when you've undressed her, start washing her. Why are you standing there? I'll make a fresh potion. We'll rub it on. And I'll bring ammonia." The gamekeeper was embarrassed after all. He was a man and she was a woman. Uncomfortable somehow. But then he thought it was for her own salvation. He washed her with a limewood washcloth and watered her with a ladle, wailing, "God, she's as skinny as a chick. All the veins are showing. How did she end up in the middle of nowhere? She's not from around here. I've never seen her in the village before." He toweled her off, wrapped her in a clean sheet, and carried her into the house. Pam had already prepared everything and whispered to him, "Good job, you did it. All right, now go away and stay out of my way. I'll take it from here. I can't promise anything, but I'll try to save her. She's very weak. Death is following her, and she's on the verge of being taken away. You'll come tomorrow in the evening." The huntsman said goodbye to the hermit but did not go home. He decided to go to the district police officer. Still, the past did not let him go. Curiosity piqued. Who was this stranger? Steve Ilyich listened to Jack's story, rubbed his chin, reasoned. "So, you say black-haired, sharp-nosed, small stature, thin, and obviously a visitor. I don't know. How would a stranger end up in the middle of nowhere? Why would she even go there? She didn't come from the city with a bag, did she? We'd have all the women here talking if a stranger showed up. No, this ain't right." And then a terrified Kenzie burst into the stronghold. "I'm in trouble, Steve," she said, sobbing. "And I'm in trouble. My daughter Wendy came to see me a week ago. She'd had some grief in her family and she was sick. She didn't want to live. She wouldn't get out of bed. So I decided to help her, you old fool. I sent her to the forest for berries. I thought it would distract my daughter, take her mind off things. But she's still not here. It's nighttime. Oh, what have I done? Where can I look for her now? What if she killed herself? I'll never forgive myself for that. Or am I lost? Help me, for Christ's sake. We've got to get people up to look for Wendy. I'm old and I can't walk much." And then the gamekeeper realized everything. He exclaimed, "I think I know where your daughter is. Don't worry, she's alive. I rescued her from the swamp. I barely had time. She was almost sucked up to her shoulders. She's unconscious. I took her to a hermit in the woods. Maybe she'll come out. She said to come back tomorrow night." Kenzie turned pale and began to cross herself. "What forest? To that witch? I should have called the paramedic. What if she kills my daughter? Oh my goodness." The cop calmed the woman down. "Kenzie, you shouldn't do that. She may be a witch, but she knows what she's doing. Remember how my wife fell off her feet? Her feet were taken away. No one in the hospital could help. But that witch doctor cured her in a month. No one can help your daughter better than her. Go home. Tomorrow you'll go with Jack to see your daughter. You'll find out. You should thank the gamekeeper. He saved Wendy's life." Kenzie turned her tear-stained gaze to Jack and threw her arms around him. "Thank you, Jack, for saving my daughter from death. I'll be grateful to you forever. And why did my Wendy have so much trouble? Her husband betrayed her. Her baby died.
This disease got attached to her, and now she almost died in the swamp. It's like someone cursed my little girl."
Wendy began to come to her senses only in the evening of the next day. She twisted her head and could not understand where she was and what was wrong with her. Then slowly she remembered all the horror on the marshes. She was wearing a long cotton shirt, and in the room under the ceiling were hung fragrant herbs, thyme, mint, and strawberry leaves. The woman tried to get up, but she felt dizzy and weak. An old wrinkled woman came into the hut, approached Wendy, put her hand on her forehead and said, "Thank God the fever has gone down, or I thought I would not be able to pull you out. Well, drowned woman, let's get acquainted, shall we? Why did you go to the swamps alone? Don't you have enough to live for? My name's Pam. A lot of the locals are afraid of me, call me a witch. I don't care about my legs. I'm doing a good deed helping people. I don't care about gossip." The rescued woman began to speak quietly. "And I'm Wendy. Thank you for saving me. How did you know? That I didn't want to live? It's true. I just wanted to be out of here as soon as possible. I was in the hospital for a month with a serious illness, but it didn't do any good. So I ran home to my mom, and she told the witch doctor the diagnosis." Pam shook her head. "I'm rarely wrong. I don't think it's anything serious. The doctors misdiagnosed you. But there are definitely thyroid and hormone problems. Are you bleeding? Weakness? Crying all the time? Fever in the evenings?" Wendy rounded her eyes. "Yes, all of those things. And there's a nasty lump in my throat that makes it hard to breathe. How did you find out? I didn't tell you anything." Pam smiled. "I'm a former doctor, a surgeon myself, so I know a thing or two. I'll see if I can get you back on your feet. Just make sure you drink everything I give you down to the bottom and don't talk too much. Either you trust me or it's all for nothing. Also, all diseases are in our heads. Apparently you cornered yourself in a death corner, girl, so the body and broke down. The first thing you gotta do is to get rid of all thoughts of death, okay? You gotta go to sleep and wake up, and you gotta repeat one prayer like a mantra, and believe that you're gonna get better, and there's no other way. Do you understand? If you're still in a hurry to get to your grave, you better leave right away, the door's right there." Wendy promised, "No, I want to live now. When I started drowning, I suddenly rethought everything. How can I leave my mommy? Just save me, I beg you, I'll do anything, I promise." Then the door opened and Jack and Kenzie came in. The woman rushed to her daughter, hugged her, kissed her and cried, whispering, "You're alive, my girl. I almost lost my mind when you didn't come home at night. I blame myself for sending you into the woods. Don't you dare die, do you hear me? I need you. Do you understand or don't you?" Wendy was crying too, whispering, "I'm sorry, Mommy. I let you down. I didn't pick the berries and I almost lost you. Pam says the doctors were wrong. I'm not gonna die. And I believe her. You believe her. I'm gonna stay here while she heals me. You go home. It's a long way. Wait for me." Then Wendy looked at the gamekeeper and said quietly, "If I could stand up, I'd fall at your feet. Thank you for saving my life. You're a real hero. And your dog is so loyal. I thought it was a wolf. I was scared." The huntsman grinned and blushed at the praise, replied, "Well, you can say that too, a hero. Just helped a man. Anyone would have done the same. Let's talk on a first-name basis. We already know each other. And you're not wrong about the wolf, it's true. I took him in when he was a baby. Pam helped me get him out. He's stayed with me ever since he wanted to live with me. His name is Gray. Well, then I'll take your mom home. It's a long way. And I'll visit with you if that's okay." Wendy blushed too, and she didn't know why, but her heart beat faster, and she said, "I'll be glad to see you, Jack. It really makes me want to live." 3 months passed. Wendy lived with the herbalist, and the gamekeeper visited her often. They walked a lot in the woods, talked to each other, ate berries, and became very close. They honestly told each other about their past. The woman literally warmed her soul next to Jack in this forest wilderness. He taught her to hug century-old trees and exchange energy with them, to listen to the sound of the wind, birdsong. Wendy's health improved as a result of Pam's treatment, and Jack didn't recognize the woman. She was better, prettier, her cheeks flushed, and she smiled more often. Meanwhile, in the city, John was in charge of Wendy's firm, and like his mother, he began underpaying and cheating the staff, introducing penalties in the form of forfeiture of bonuses, and many maids began to quit. When he was told at the hospital that Wendy had simply run away without even being discharged, He realized that she had gone to her native land to say goodbye to her mother. He had no hope of seeing her alive, frolicking with his mistresses and living life to the fullest. The fate of his wife did not bother him at all. For him, she was gone forever. But one day Louise came running home to him all frantic and began to tell him, "We buried Wendy too soon, and she's alive and well, and she's got herself a man. What are we going to do now? Did we cry for our money?" John couldn't believe it. No way. How could it be? How do you know? She wasn't given a chance. She didn't even get up. Louise kept on saying, "A friend called me. Farmers came to her from Svetli to give her milk, and they told me everything. They said she'd been taken out by a forest witch, so now your beloved wife has 9 lives like a cat." John was furious. "I don't believe it. Tomorrow we go to the village. I must see it for myself. I'll make her come back. I'll tell her lies. We'll kill her quicker than that." Wendy had just returned to her mom's house with Jack at her side, leading her by the hand. Kenzie had made pies and Wendy's favorite sauerkraut sauce waiting for her daughter. Suddenly, an expensive Jeep came speeding around the corner. The car braked sharply, and John and Louise got out. The man saw his wife, so happy and blooming, and next to her a stately and pleasant companion with a beard. He was leading her so gently, holding her under his elbow. The blood rushed to John's head, and he felt, strangely enough, a painful prick of jealousy, though he had always thought he did not love Wendy. He ran up to the couple, Louise following him, and began, "Well, hello, sweetheart. That's where you've run away from your husband. I thought you were really sick, but you're not wasting your time here. You're having affairs with men, aren't you? Let's go home immediately. We'll negotiate there." The mother-in-law echoed her son. "What's the matter, Wendy? Why are you dishonoring your husband and our family name? Aren't you ashamed?" Wendy was stunned, so confused that she didn't even know what to say. She didn't want to go back. She and John had been strangers for a long time. Jack stood up for the woman. "Dear man, listen. Aren't you overreacting? Why did you rush to look for your family man only after 3 months? You must have known where her home was. Do you have any idea what Wendy had to go through to get back on her feet? Where have you been? For better or for worse? Together? Forever? Isn't that what you swear at the altar?" Louise got angry. "Who the hell are you, and why are you meddling in our family? We're going to have to do this without you. Wendy, don't listen to any of these people and get ready. The car is waiting." The huntsman grinned and replied, "Tricksters. And you, I see, did not recognize me, my dear. And for nothing, or you would have run away at once. Do you remember such an intrusive investigator? The one who almost put you in jail for fraud 6 years ago? I can see it in your eyes. Well, that's me. And all the evidence of your guilt is in a safe place. I haven't lost anything. You're still running your scams, aren't you? You've learned nothing from life. Well, it's about time. Wendy told me everything. And since she's alive and well, the will is invalid. It's a shame, isn't it? Isn't that why you came all the way down here to find out? I think John and Wendy can really work out for themselves whether they want to go on living or not. But you'll have to answer for everything. I wouldn't miss it for the world." Louise got cold feet and started to rush her son. "John, let's get out of here. You see how things have turned out. Please, leave Wendy alone. I don't care about her right now. Let her live as she pleases." But the son didn't give up. He took Wendy aside and started to persuade her to come back. "Honey, please, let's go home. Don't be silly. Why do you want to go to this dump? We're in business. Family and love. I love you so much, my darling." But Wendy didn't believe a word he said. She smiled sadly and replied sharply, "Do you hear yourself, John? First of all, the business is not ours. It's mine, if you haven't forgotten. And the apartment is mine by right. You had nothing to do with it. Secondly, I'm not going to live with you. We're getting a divorce. And thirdly, you never loved me. Don't lie to me or to yourself. You never cared about me. You parasitized and lived off me. And you were waiting for me to die, otherwise you'd never have made me sign a will while you were alive. I'll come back in a week so you won't set foot in the apartment. I don't want to see you ever again. Goodbye." John and Louise left without a word, and Jack put his arm around Wendy and said, "Is that who your mother-in-law is? Well, I'm not surprised now. She's a con artist, a lying, two-faced woman. When I worked as an investigator, there were hundreds of complaints against her. I had so much dirt I wanted to punish her. But then my wife's death threw everything out of whack. My life came to a screeching halt, and I quit my job. But I didn't have time to include that evidence in the case. I took the file with me. I didn't have time for that. But now I swear she's going to get hurt. Or she'll just keep on abusing people. Poor you. I can imagine how much you've suffered from her. And your son is the same because, as they say, you can't make an orange from an aspen. What have you decided? Are you going back to the city to your husband? Or what? To be honest, I'm so attached to you. I can't imagine being alone again. But I won't force you. You have a more comfortable life in the city. More fun. Wendy looked Jack straight in the eye and said, Jack, if I ever go there, it'll be to sell everything. I'm not going anywhere from the village now. You taught me to love the forest, my home. I feel good here. I rest my soul. And all this chasing after money is so exhausting. It's like a compressed spring all the time. I'm planning to build a house here and start a whole new business. I'm going to start a farm and raise purebred quail. I've been on the brink of death so many times that I've realized I have to live my life the way my heart tells me to, not the way my mind tells me to. I also wish you were always there for me. I can feel your soul, and you can feel mine. By the way, how do you feel about this idea? Will you help me? Jack was so happy, he hugged Wendy and whispered, With you together I'd be ready to raise ostriches, not just quail but ostriches, as long as we're together side by side. I fell in love with you back then, in the bathhouse, when I was changing and bathing you. You were so helpless, so small and thin, like a chick, and something in my soul trembled and twitched. I needed you, Wendy, like air. You made my lonely life make sense at last. Shall we go? Mommy's probably waiting for you. Wendy got a little stronger and went to town. She sold her firm very profitably along with her apartment, loaded her belongings into a truck and into her car, leaving to live in the country forever. There were no regrets. The dusty, stuffy, bustling city after the silence of the forest stunned her. She wanted to go back again. To where Mom and Jack were, where there was peace and quiet in her soul. Jack went with her too, but on another matter. He took all the materials on Louise's case to the investigators he knew and asked them to reopen the case. He assured her that there were many interesting dark deeds in her current activities. And the flywheel of justice turned. Guys from the Economic Security Department began to conduct checks, and the results revealed a lot of violations. Now Louise was facing jail time, and a lot of it. Her company's accounts were frozen, and then the company went under the hammer as a bankrupt company. John was so scared of prison time that he immediately went abroad to sunny Spain. He never thought of saving his mom, as he was always only concerned about his own skin. Louise only now, sitting in the detention center, and waiting for the court in solitude, began to realize what an egoist she raised. Since childhood, everything for her son, the best private schools, the most fashionable gadgets, vacations at resorts. He knew no denial of anything, and she did the best she could. Yes, she cheated people, laundered money through fake accounts, but it was all for John, just for her favorite son. And what did she get in return? Now the son left his mother as soon as the audit started. He ran off and put almost all of her savings on the card, and now she's the one who's going to be responsible for everything. Louise paced back and forth in her cell all day long, tearing her hair out, crying and not understanding how her only son could treat her like that. In the meantime, Wendy had a whole new village life. With the proceeds from the sale, the couple bought materials, and Jack and his workers began to build a house. According to Wendy's plan, it should be spacious, with communications and a balcony on the second floor. For her favorite mommy, she thought of everything. A bed with an orthopedic mattress, a comfortable rocking chair, and of course a flower bed on the plot with a small vegetable garden. A farm was being built in the yard, according to all the rules, so that the animals and poultry would be comfortable there. Kenzie couldn't be happy. Now she and her daughter were inseparable. She liked Jack a lot too. A hard-working, simple man. You could see how much he loved his daughter, how he cherished her. And Wendy blossomed from such a reverent attitude toward her. Outwardly, the man seemed withdrawn and taciturn. He couldn't sing like a nightingale, but he proved his love by deeds, even in small things. Silently covered his wife with a plaid if she lay down and dozed off. made her regularly drink herbal remedies to strengthen her body, and at night he raked her huge arms in a pile and pressed her to himself as the greatest treasure, gently whispering in her ear, "I will not give you to anyone, my love." A year passed. The house was finished. The farm was finished. All the while, Wendy worked as a bookkeeper for the village council. She and Jack bought Vietnamese piglets, quail, and purebred rabbits for breeding. Slowly, the business took off. Wendy successfully sold products to rich customers, because recently many people have become adherents of a healthy diet. Rabbits and quail eggs were especially valued. There was always a big line for them. Kenzie learned to make goat cheese as well as a professional, and it was always sold out by lunchtime. The family business now needed to hire employees, and one by one the villagers began to leave the greedy and insufferable Carl. Wendy knew how to motivate the staff. She had solid experience. Farmer Carl threatened Wendy that he would burn their farm to the ground. He did not like this competition, as he had long considered himself the king of the village. Being a very hard man, even his customers didn't get along with him. He didn't want to give up a penny to anyone. And now many of his regular customers have defected to this family. They began to take products only from them. Now the greedy farmer was determined that we can't delay. It is necessary to wipe out these upstarts from the face of the earth and again take over the whole trade. He did not dare to set fire to the farm himself, but hired 2 local alcoholics, offering them a handsome reward. That night, Wendy and Jack slept soundly, tired from the day's running. Kenzie, on the other hand, couldn't sleep. The weather was making her bones ache and her joints twisted. The woman rubbed them with ointment, wrapped herself in a shawl, and sat in a rocking chair. Suddenly, Kenzie clearly heard a commotion in the yard, the cracking of fence boards breaking, and then Gray's long howl. She freaked out, went to wake the young ones. Jack was rubbing his eyes and didn't understand anything, but when he heard the call of his faithful friend, he jumped up. He grabbed his gun from the wall and ran into the yard, Wendy after him. And there was a sight to behold. 2 scoundrels with gasoline cans had not even reached the farm before Gray neutralized one of the arsonists by hooking him in the leg. He was screaming, but the other had forgotten about the arson and was trying to wrestle his friend away from the huge wolf. Jack commanded Wendy, "Go get the policeman, honey, hurry up. I'll take care of this one." The woman dashed toward Steve, and Jack rushed to defend his property with his chest. He'd put so much hard work into his business, and he wasn't about to give up. A fight ensued, but the gamekeeper was strong and soon had the 2 scoundrels down, especially since they were drunk. He pointed his gun at them and yelled, "Who sent you? Come on, quickly confess, you bastards. How much were you paid for doing such a despicable thing? You bastards. You should have done something with your own hands, but you're only good at drinking. I'll count to 3 and shoot. It's time. 1, 2. The rascals immediately lost their nerve. Losing their lives for the sake of some arson was not in their plans. One of them shouted, Don't shoot, Jack. Carl hired us, promised us 500,000 each. Forgive us, please." The precinct commander came up with Wendy, and when he saw the familiar troublemakers, he sighed. "What have they done again? What have they done? My patience is at an end. Arson is no longer a joke or shoplifting vodka. You'll go to jail, my lovebirds. If life hasn't taught you anything." Wendy and Jack noticed that Gray was still lying there, breathing heavily, with a scarlet stain on his fluffy, light-colored fur. They immediately ran over to him. Jack wailed, "Gray, my friend, what's the matter with you? Did that son of a bitch get a knife? Let me take a look at you. Don't growl, you have to. I'll save you like I used to. Hold on, don't die. Please, you are my most loyal and faithful friend." The man immediately picked up the shaggy friend in his arms. Wendy started the car, and in the middle of the night they raced into the woods to Pam. They left the car on the road, then walked 3 kilometers. The wolf was completely weakened and only whimpered quietly. His nose was hot. He breathed often, sticking out his tongue. The healer let the couple in again without questioning or talking. Gray was laid on the table, and the wound was treated. When Wendy saw the crooked needle and thread in her hands, she felt sick to her stomach. Pam commanded, "Jack, tie your friend's mouth with rope. I don't have any anesthetic. I'll sew like this, and hold him tight so he doesn't twitch. Wendy, don't just stand there, pull his hair back, help him out." Poor Gray was still trying to break free and howling with pain and tears in his eyes. I barely managed to stitch up the wound. Then Pam began to force-feed him a little of some potion and gave Jack some ointment, telling him to do as she said, and to bring the wolf in for dressings every other day. And the main thing is to make sure he doesn't chew the threads on the wound. Animals do that instinctively. Slowly, Gray got better, began to drink water, and then to eat. Jack was always with him, carrying him to dressings, stroking him and whispering something. Kenzie said softly to Wendy, "Here, daughter, look. A man who loves animals so much can't be a scoundrel. And Jack is your real man. You hang on to him and appreciate him. You're finally in luck, my little sweetheart." Carl had been locked up for attempted murder, and now he'd have to think hard about life and his attitude to people in prison. John quickly squandered his money abroad and tried to settle down there, but he didn't know the language, and he wasn't used to working. His mother or Wendy had done it for him all his life. He was asked to move out of his rented apartment for non-payment and had to return home. But once the creditors found out, his life became hell. He was hiding and afraid of every rustle, and then he disappeared somewhere. Apparently they found him. Wendy's ex-fiancé, the same Dave who had so meanly abandoned her in her youth, came to the farm one day. He apologized to the woman. "Hello, Wendy. I know you must hate me, and with good reason. I married Claire back then. But I soon regretted it. I mean, we didn't love each other one bit. We lived like cats and dogs. She bossed me around and didn't think I was human. And then she filed for divorce and fled to the capital, found herself a beau richer and more respectable than me. My parents died a long time ago, and I'm just a casual wage earner. I guess I'm being punished for what I did. Wendy, I don't know why I'm here. Why don't you take me to work on your farm? Anything I can do anything. I need the money. My sister Ellie is very sick. She's all I've got left." He didn't expect anything. He thought Wendy would chase him away, and that would have been fair enough. But no, the woman smiled and said, "You're right, Dave. I really hated you for years. Couldn't understand why you did that to me. Disgraced me like that. But now, having been through a lot, I'm not angry with you. On the contrary, if you hadn't left me then, I wouldn't have gone to school. I wouldn't have been able to achieve anything. I wouldn't have built a business. And most importantly, I wouldn't have met Jack. You know, it was only with him that I realized what it is to be loved. And we do need employees. So come on down and get a job. Just be warned, no drinking and no laziness. Otherwise I'll kick you out. If you do your best, we won't hurt you with money." The man was so happy, he thanked Wendy, and the next day, he started work. Slowly, he watched the relationship of the owners, and bit his elbows that he had lost such a woman. And once Wendy had loved him sincerely. Another 6 months passed. Wendy felt fine. Her old ailments were no longer bothering her, except that she began to put on a lot of weight, which was unusual for her. She'd always been naturally thin, even overweight. But now she began to eat like crazy, especially her mother's pies and sweets. And there was a heaviness in her lower abdomen. The cycle was off. The woman, of course, worried a little, but the farm and the whirlwind of troubles did not let her get discouraged, and she kept postponing a visit to the paramedic. But when her belly began to grow larger, Jack sounded the alarm, and as usual, he dragged his wife not to the paramedic, because he didn't trust an old man who drank, but to Pam. She was already very old, and almost never accepted anyone. But she still lived in the woods, refusing flatly to move closer to people, even though Jack had offered her 100 times. The healer took one look at Wendy, listened to her, and laughed loudly. Jack was taken aback. Wendy didn't see anything funny either. The pair looked at each other and decided that Pam was getting a little out of hand. But she suddenly said in a hoarse, crackling voice, "Are you really here to look for a disease?" I took one look at Wendy and I knew she was pregnant. Her belly's about to be 4 months old. Congratulations. I think it's going to be a girl. All the signs are there. Wendy was dumbfounded. She'd never thought of pregnancy. After all, she'd been diagnosed with a miscarriage many years ago. She squeezed her belly and whispered, "It can't be. I don't believe it. I was diagnosed with infertility. So many years and only one miscarriage. Is it really true?" Jack, who had also dreamed of children for so many years, couldn't believe it. He hugged Wendy and wailed, "Tomorrow we'll go to town to the hospital. I'm not letting you anywhere near the farm, not even close. I never thought I'd be a father someday." The couple left the doctor's office happy. Everything was confirmed. Even Pam's due date was right. They were scolded for being so late to register. The ultrasound showed it was a girl. Wendy and Jack immediately went to church, thanking the Almighty for such a gift and praying that the baby would be born healthy. Kenzie also cried for a long time when she heard the news. She hugged her daughter and rejoiced. "Thank God, my daughter. It's crazy, I'm going to be a grandmother, it's so exciting. I have to equip the nursery now, buy everything, it's a lot of work. Sweetie, you've waited so long for this. You've been through so many trials. And here it is, the reward. I wish you nothing but happiness with Jack, and I'm looking forward to having a granddaughter." From that day on, Jack took care of Wendy, forbade her even to lift a bucket of water, and did everything himself. He always asked her how she was feeling, if she had any pain. In the evenings, he would put his ear to her tummy and talk earnestly to his daughter, and she would push back. Wendy was radiant, warm, and happy. She had no regrets about her past sorrows and troubles, about her unsuccessful marriage. Apparently, it was her thorny path to true happiness.